Hello and welcome to this week's video in a series looking at still life as our subject matter. This week I want to concentrate on two things: seeing reflected lights and also working with a broader range of pencils than that exercise that we did last week, where I encouraged you to only use perhaps a 6B. You can see here in the photograph how I have set up the jug this week. This is in my shadow box, which is painted in a mid-tone grey, and I have placed the jug on red paper and one wall with blue paper, and the light is coming from the side, from the right hand side and slightly above. You can see from this position how the red paper and the blue paper reflects colour, which is where the reflected lights would be if the paper was removed, into the dark areas there of the jug. This is a really useful trick if you're unable to see the reflected lights in the object that you're looking at, is to get some coloured paper or a coloured surface and reflect that light bouncing off those surfaces or around the object back into the object, so with the colour that you can see. You can see also the parts of the jug that are affected by either the wall or the floor, and you then can perhaps see an area there where the two colours merge and you get a violety colour as well. I think it's always very interesting to see how much reflected light there really is in the object that you're looking at. Here you can now see the jug without the coloured paper, and hopefully you can still see those reflected lights. There's a rule to do with reflected lights and also dark areas that we sometimes see, small dark areas. And that is a rule regarding their tone, and it's an easy one to remember, and that is that any light within a dark, so a reflected light would be a light area within a dark area, is darker than you think. So a light within a dark is darker than you think, and vice versa. A dark within a light is lighter than you think. A classic little light in this setup with the jug would be the small area of dark within the jug itself there at the top. It won't be quite as dark as what you think it is. Before you start to draw or paint this setup, try placing some other shaped objects with the blue and red floor. The jug, it's a cylindrical object, and so it behaves a certain way in these circumstances. Here all I have done is replace the cylindrical jug with a bowl. I haven't changed the light source, so the light source is coming from quite high. Look at what happens all there underneath of the bowl in terms of reflected light. So much of the bowl underneath is affected, is lightened slightly by reflected light. And you can see particularly there up near the rim how strong that red becomes. Also observe that lovely transition from red through to violet to that area of stronger blue there on the left. And here is the bowl without the red and blue paper. Here we are with the jug again. Think about the areas that are coloured, and think about how those areas are the areas facing the reflected colour therefrom. So take, for instance, where it's bluest on the jug is the part of the jug that is the most towards the blue wall. if you look at the parts that are reddest, these are the parts that are closest to the red floor. Really take a good hard look at the handle and see how that there are certain parts that are really red and other parts of it that are really blue. For the exercise this week, I want you to start very much like what we did last week, in that you are massing a light and a dark mass, as if you were standing 10 paces away, but this time I want you to be up closer, like you were in the final drawing last week. But you have to, at that position, decide to draw and to mass just the light and the dark masses that you can see. Make a decision either that areas are dark or areas are light. The other aspect of this part of the drawing too is that we're going to use two pencils to do this. You're going to use your 2H to do the light and a 2B to do the dark. Mass the dark first and be squinting down and looking at your subject matter and try to match in tone the dark mass that you do with the 2B to the dark mass that you see in the object. And the same for the light area. So squint at your drawing, squint at the subject matter, and try and get the two tones to match up. You're now going to come in with the HB and mass in the half tone. The half tone, remember, is that darkest part of the light half. You can see here in my example that there's just a subtle difference, and that the light is like a crescent there on the upper part of the jug, starting from near the pouring lip and working its way down, not all the way to the bottom. Then, using a 4B pencil, I have massed in the dark a little darker, and at this stage also put in the handle of the jug, bringing that out from the background, as well as strengthening the cast shadow along the floor and up onto that wall. It is also then at this stage that we then move on to the 6B and look for the hump, that clearly defined darker area just after the terminator, and that darkest part of the dark shadow. In this final step, I've used 8B to darken the umbra, and then with my kneadable eraser I have picked out the highlights, namely around the lip, there at the very pouring lip, and if there were, but there weren't in this case, any highlights along the body of the jug or the object you choose to draw. I would encourage you to try and do an object that is white again for this exercise. Simply, it's much easier to work with an object that's white, that you're able to see all these reflected colours and see the tones more accurately. Don't worry about it having to be something really fancy. It's best that it is just something simple. So even if it is just a mug from the kitchen cupboard, or something like that, a simpler white bowl than the one that I showed you before, don't overcomplicate the shapes. Good, solid, seeable cones, cylinders, spheres are really the best objects to start working with, and that you're able to see all the parts and understand how the reflected lights are working on them, as we've seen this week and last. As always, good luck. If you have any questions before I see you on Zoom, please don't hesitate to email me, and I look forward to seeing your results. Take care.